I'm going to run through our last lecture regarding comping. As I'm sure you'll guess, this is something we're going to be getting into shortly once we're done with our wireframe project. So here's our brief introduction. So comping is far less complicated and expensive to make design changes to a comp of a web product rather than it is to make changes after it has been developed. So once you get into all the coding and everything like that online, it's a lot harder to go in and make changes versus just move some things around quickly. So here's our process. You guys should recognize this. A website comp, aka a high fidelity mockup, is essentially a complete visual mockup of what a web product will look like after it goes through the web development coding stage. So we've got our sketches, we've got our wireframe and our mockup, and then we get to development. High fidelity mockups reflect the design choices for color schemes, layouts, typography, iconography, the visuals of navigation, the overall look and feel of the web product. At this stage, the branding of the website can really start to take shape. So we realize the colors for our site, what our buttons are going to look like on a hover, all of those sort of things. So here's what a high fidelity mockup will look like in Sketch. Sketch was one of the programs that we could have used for our wireframes. Why create comps? So this is the most important step in the web design process, as it gives the client and stakeholders a very good idea of how the finished web product will appear to a user. So you guys and your clients might have thought at first, okay, so, what's the point of the wireframes? It's really just kind of like I've noted several times, to get the skeleton down, realizing where we're going to put imagery, etc. And then this is our next phase of things. So this is really now getting the look and feel of things. We also prototype, so we realize when things don't function properly. So perhaps we don't realize that there's no way to get the pop-up to disappear. So we need to add a close button. When we click this arrow, we're going to go to this page, etc. So those little things get defined at the beginning, in the comping stage at the beginning before we get into anything too tough in development. Although this is also billable hours, it's a necessary step to ensure that what was agreed upon will be created. So your clients now have one last chance to make changes to the design before it's sent off. So hopefully things don't go too far down the rabbit hole once you start creating your comps. If they start moving things drastically, that's where, from a client standpoint, you might need to make some budgeting changes. But for the most part, at this stage, you might be move this button over here, change this color to this, etc. So again, why are we creating these comps? So it's really intuitive to the stakeholders. So thanks to their higher fidelity, comps require less context than low-fi documents like wireframes. Stakeholders can more easily see the final product. So now they get a really strong visual of what things are going to look like versus, just our monochromatic look just to get the placement of things. So it most certainly reveals problems as well. This is a big, big important step. So it's one thing to have all your visuals made, decisions made, but it's another to see them all working together in a way close to the real thing. So this is where we can create our comps from InVision or from Sketch or from XD. Comps can help reveal problems that aren't so apparent on paper, for example, color clashes or smaller type crimes going on unnoticed. So again, making sure things are perhaps maybe centered, etc. Revisions to the products may still be necessary at this stage, usually is for the most part. It would be quite magical if they would approve as is. There's usually renditions after this. Once again, it's easier to make the revisions now than when it's coded. So defining that maybe we need the color changed throughout the site, or we don't like that font, etc. We don't like the placement. Or like I said, anything like problems, we don't know how to close this button or close this screen down. The working comp file can be used in the development process as a guide to help the developer create the production version of the website. Assets and other graphics can be exported directly from a sketch file, such as a PNG, a JPEG, SVG file, Sketch, XD, for the most part, I imagine you guys would be working from. So you can export all of that, and your developer now has everything he needs essentially in a big luggage. Kind of like packaging a file up from InDesign or from Illustrator. So a website mockup file is useful for developers as they can get assets like hex codes and text sizes right from the files. They're not guessing from just maybe looking at an actual visual on paper, or maybe it's just a visual on a PDF. They're physically able to see the exact point size that your client has either maybe liked, or probably actually more so your client has approved. So 3 ways to create comps, because we're designers. Our tools of the trade are essentially InDesign, Photoshop, and Illustrator. So we kind of tend to go there. The downside to those programs is that they're pretty much created for print. The downside to these tools were inherently created for print and render well beyond 72 dpi. They also don't allow for interactions to be added. So they can be very high res, which is great, but we're unable to do that prototyping integration right in there. So as for coding, coded mockups are certainly an efficient way to save time, as many of the coding issues for interface elements can be fixed on the spot. So Bootstrap, Foundation, other responsive frameworks are popular tools in this space. The issues are that it takes time to revise. It's much easier to explore design decisions in tools made for UI versus looking at all those numbers. So you might already have some experience in code, so you might know what that is. Even if you can code, it's still much harder to go through and find certain issues, change little minor things, than seeing them happen essentially on the fly. So UI apps, obviously those are the winners. So tools that are created specifically for interface exist in abundance. So again, totally repeating, but Sketch, XD, UXPin, etc. These tools are focused on the web designer and render in a web space appropriate for web, which is 72. In many cases, CSS information, pixel dimensions, interactive elements can be extracted by the developer during the coding stages. So when we involve this super cool developer, work with the developer on interactive elements, animations, interface elements, navigation, etc. So all those need to be defined at this point. So it's good to speak with the developer so they can help understand the mechanics of the code. So perhaps when you go to something in your navigation and you want to hover over it to get to the about page, and you want a little line to show up underneath it, or maybe you want it to fade into bold type or fade into a different color. Those are all things that you'll want to tell the developer, as they'll know perhaps that the color is going to change from your comps, but maybe how you want it to change. Like I said, either a fade in, how it's going to navigate in, it will slide in from the left, from the top, etc. So while knowing coding basics are essential to a UX or UI designer, speaking with a developer may circumvent any issues with designed elements that can't be created with code. So sometimes we have big ideas, and sometimes that developer will say, no, that's going to not work, or it's going to blast your budget out of the water, etc. So great to know those things ahead of time. So always use your resource. When tasked with creating a high fidelity comp, a junior designer can easily become overwhelmed with questions like how to indicate a dropdown. What color will be the background? Navigation bar B. What does an accordion interface look like? Looking to other websites in the category can be helpful when defining content and layout, but they don't necessarily help with UI elements themselves. Fortunately, many UX UI designers have been faced with these dilemmas, and solutions exist on the web with helpful examples and downloadable assets and UI kits, as we've seen with our wireframes. So FreebiesBug is a great resource for web designers with many downloadable assets. You can download, you can go to the site and search what you want and download everything. These downloads are broken into categories in software, so you can find out what works for you or what application you want to work and utilize them that way. SketchUp Sources is a great place for UI kits and icons, web products, etc. This is generally only for the Sketch app, so if you're not working in Sketch, this might not be super helpful for you. XD Guru, again, this one's just for XD, so perhaps for most of us working in XD, this one might be most beneficial to you. Whoopsies. I never know how to say this name, and Veto Market, so you can locate lots of stuff there. Again, you can filter and refine your searches to find templates that work for you in whatever program you're using. Looking to modern website templates, ThemeForest, Template Monster, those are also really great areas to go to. Google searches to find out comps, find some high fidelity comps, see what's working, see what's modern. If you're looking for modern, search modern template. If you're looking for classic, search that. And those things can all just kind of go in a folder of inspiration to help when we're developing things further along in our comps. So it's really important to nail down as many details in the user interface as possible with your comps. Once all design and content decisions are made, the comps are created, signed off, and the process of creating an interactive prototype of the site can begin. So we'll be getting into that in a couple weeks. I believe it's a couple of weeks. I'll have to double check the dates, but I'm sure most of you, or hopefully most of you, are looking forward to really adding some real images, some live color on your sites, and really making everything come to life. Thanks, guys.